The envelope sliced through the air like a guillotine blade, landing on David's kitchen table with a thud that echoed louder than the freight trains rumbling past his Omaha bungalow every dawn. "Dad," Emily's elegant script began, "I love you, but this day is about new beginnings, ones that don't carry old shadows." He crumpled it in his fist, the cream cardstock tearing like his heart, as the first fat raindrop of a Nebraska storm splattered against the window, blurring the world outside into a watercolor of regret. David Harlan, 52 and still broad-shouldered from years hauling mail bags for the USPS, stared at the invitation's wreckage, his calloused fingers trembling. 30 years ago, he traded flannel shirts and stolen kisses in the back of a '78 Ford pickup for a white picket fence and a daughter who called him her hero. Now, that daughter, his Emily, with her sharp wit and sharper heels, was marrying a banker from Lincoln, and the only role left for him was the ghost at the feast. He poured a tumbler of bourbon, neat, the amber liquid burning a path down his throat like the accusations he'd swallowed since coming out a decade ago. "Shadows," he muttered to the empty room, the word tasting like ash. How had the girl who'd once begged him to read The Velveteen Rabbit, until his voice cracked, become the woman who saw his love as a stain? Outside, the storm unleashed its fury, wind whipping the elms in his yard into a frenzy that matched the one building in his chest. David paced the linoleum floor, worn smooth by a lifetime of small steps toward normalcy, each one a lie he'd told himself. Emily's mother, Sarah, had taken the divorce hard, packed up and moved to Phoenix with a realtor named Greg, leaving David to raise their girl alone in this two-bedroom time capsule. He'd done it with bedtime stories about brave knights who loved whoever made their hearts sing. But those tales had soured when Emily hit her teens, her friends' whispers turning to outright stares after he started dating Mark, the quiet history teacher with eyes like Lake Michigan on a calm day. "It's just phase stuff, Dad," she'd said back then, her voice tight as she slammed her bedroom door. "But phases don't last. Love does, even when it costs you everything." He sank into the sagging armchair by the fireplace, the one Mark had reupholstered in faded denim before ALS stole him away 3 years prior. The mantel held their photos, David and Mark at the Pride Parade in Des Moines, rainbow flags whipping like victory banners, Emily's high school graduation, her smile wide as the Platte River, arm looped through his without a hint of hesitation. Now, that smile haunted him from the invitation's embossed photo, her in a lace gown, beaming beside her fiancé, Tom Whitaker, a clean-cut type with a jawline like a Kennedy and a family fortune from Whitaker Feeds, the corn empire that fed half the Midwest. Tom's folks were old money, the kind that built cathedrals and whispered about family values at country club brunches. David had met them once, at a tense dinner where Mrs. Whitaker's pearls seemed to tighten with every laugh he shared with Mark. "Such a tragedy," she'd cooed later, "about the divorce, not the disease." Emily had laughed it off then, but now it was her wedding, her rules, and the rule was clear: no queers in the front pews. The bourbon warmed him, but it couldn't thaw the ice in his veins. He thought of calling her, of demanding why the man who'd bandaged her scraped knees and cheered her through braces couldn't witness her vows. But the phone stayed silent on the side table, next to Mark's old Timex, stopped at 3:17, the minute he'd drawn his last breath in that hospice bed, whispering, "Love her fierce, Dave. Even when she don't love back." David had promised. God, he'd promised. Yet here he was, fierce as a whipped dog, tail between his legs. The rain hammered on, a relentless percussion to his unraveling, until headlights pierced the gloom. A battered Jeep pulling into the drive, its wipers slashing back the downpour. His neighbor, Riley, the tattooed mechanic from the garage down the block, who fixed David's truck for free and brought over casseroles after Mark's funeral like it was his job to glue broken men back together. Riley burst in without knocking, shaking rain from his leather jacket like a retriever, his dark curls plastered to a forehead creased with concern. Saw the lights on. Figured you were brooding again. What's got you looking like you lost a fight with a buzzsaw? 38. Riley was all lean muscle and quiet fire. The kind of guy who'd grown up in the same rough-and-tumble Omaha neighborhoods as David, dodging factory whistles and Bible thumpers. They'd bonded over oil changes and offhand comments about the Cubs' latest collapse. But lately, those talks lingered, over backyard beers, Riley's knee brushing David's in the firelight, sparks jumping unspoken. David thrust the mangled invitation at him, words spilling out in a torrent. The exclusion, the shadows, the ache that had festered since Emily's engagement party, where she'd introduced him as my dad, the retiree with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Riley read it silently, his jaw clenching like he was biting back a curse, then tossed it into the cold grate. Bullshit, he said flatly, crossing to the kitchen for 2 fresh glasses. She's scared, Dave. Whitaker money comes with strings, old school ones. But you're the real deal. Walk in there anyway. Show em what family looks like. David laughed, bitter and broken, but Riley's hand on his shoulder steadied him, warm through the flannel. For the first time in months, the touch didn't feel like pity. It felt like possibility, a bridge over the chasm Emily had carved. They talked late into the night, the storm easing to a drizzle, Riley sharing stories of his own fractured kin. A brother lost to the bottle, a father who'd called him unnatural before the cancer silenced him. We don't get to choose blood, Riley said, clinking glasses, but we damn well choose who bleeds for us. By midnight, the bourbon bottle stood empty, and David felt the first crack in his resolve. Maybe he wouldn't stay away. Maybe he'd fight for his place at that altar, shadows and all. As Riley left, promising to help polish the old truck for the drive to Lincoln, David lingered in the doorway, watching taillights fade into the wet night. The house felt less empty, the invitation's sting dulled to a bruise. But sleep evaded him, his mind replaying Emily's childhood vows. I'll always be your girl, Daddy. Against the adult silence that had grown between them, he wandered to the garage, flipping on the fluorescent hum, and pulled a dusty box from the rafters. Mark's things, untouched since the burial. Inside, a leather journal, its pages filled with Mark's neat script. Lessons for Emily he'd never deliver. Dreams of a family cabin in the Black Hills where they'd fish and forget the world's judgments. Tucked between the leaves, a faded Polaroid, the 3 of them at the county fair, cotton candy sticks in hand, laughter frozen in sepia. David's throat tightened. He'd failed Mark by letting Emily slip away, by hiding his grief in solitude. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving, the alarm clock buzzing like an angry hornet. David showered, the hot water scouring away last night's haze, and dressed in his Sunday best. A charcoal suit Mark had picked out for their 10th anniversary, crisp white shirt starched by his own hands. The drive to Emily's apartment in Lincoln was 2 hours of cornfields and classic rock on the radio, Bruce Springsteen crooning about thunder roads and glory days. He rehearsed his speech a dozen times. No accusations, just love, raw and unfiltered. I'm your father. Gay or straight, that's not the half of it. Let me stand with you. Her building was a sleek high-rise downtown, all glass and ambition, a far cry from the bungalow's creaks. Emily buzzed him up, her voice crackling through the intercom with forced cheer. Dad, come on in. She met him at the door in yoga pants and a silk robe, hair in a messy bun, the apartment smelling of fresh paint and takeout Thai. Hugs were exchanged. stiff on her end, desperate on his, but the air thickened when she poured coffee, avoiding his eyes. So, the invite, she started, stirring sugar into her mug with unnecessary vigor. I meant what I wrote. Tom's family. They're traditional. And after Aunt Karen's meltdown at Thanksgiving. Aunt Karen's a bigot with a Bible complex. David cut in, sharper than intended. This isn't about her. It's about us. Your wedding. I changed your diapers. Chased off nightmares. You can't just. I can. Emily's voice cracked. Mug slamming down. Coffee sloshing like tears. You think it's easy? Marrying into the Whitakers means stability. Dad, a life without scraping by on pensions and odd jobs. But they ask questions. About you. About Mark. And I freeze. Because what do I say? That my father's some parade flag-waving activist who parades his boyfriends around like it's normal. The words hung. Venomous and unintended. Her hand flying to her mouth too late. David's world tilted. He'd never paraded. Never pushed. He'd just lived. Quietly. After years of closets and compromises. The silence stretched. Broken only by the distant honk of traffic. Emily deflated. Sinking onto the couch. Pulling her knees up like the girl who'd skinned them on bike paths. I'm sorry. God. I'm sorry. It's just. Tom's mom hinted at the prenup clauses. Family approval. Or no trust fund for the kids we'll have. And I want this. That. I want the house. The security. Not the drama. David knelt before her. Taking her hands, cold. Trembling. Drama? Baby. Love isn't drama. It's the only thing that lasts. I lost Mark to that damn disease. Watched him fade while the world patted my back and whispered, tragic. But he taught me, real family fights for the light, not the shadows. He squeezed her fingers, willing her to see the man who'd built her treehouse with calloused hands, who'd cried with her over first heartbreaks. For a heartbeat, her eyes softened, the old Emily peeking through. Come anyway, she whispered. Back row. Quiet. He nodded, relief flooding like spring thaw, and they talked then, really talked, for the first time in years. About Tom's quiet kindness, the Whitaker estate's sprawling acres, the fears she buried under bridal Pinterest boards. As he left, promising discretion, David felt a fragile bridge forming. But in the elevator, his phone buzzed, a text from Riley. Heard from a buddy at the garage. Whitaker's old man just kicked it. We'll reading tomorrow. Small world. Ha! David's gut twisted. Edward Whitaker, the corn kingpin, gone. Rumors swirled of eccentric codicils, conditions that could upend empires. He pocketed the phone, the Lincoln skyline blurring past, unaware how those words would rewrite not just Tom's future, but his own. Back home, the bungalow welcomed him with its familiar hush, but unrest stirred. David fired up the grill for a solo steak. Riley's doing, left on the porch with a note, fuel for the fight. As flames licked the meat, he scrolled news on his phone. Edward Whitaker's obituary. A stern patriarch who'd built an agribusiness behemoth from dust bowl dirt, survived 2 wars, and outlived 3 wives. Devoted family man, it read, with photos of Tom as a boy on tractor seats. No mention of the whispers, affairs, a hidden son, debts shuffled like bad hands in poker. David chewed thoughtfully, the siren's wail of a passing cop car underscoring the ordinary chaos of Omaha evenings. Riley showed up at dusk, toolbox in hand, claiming the truck's brakes needed one last tweak. They worked side by side in the garage, grease smudging forearms, conversation flowing easy as cores. Emily caved a bit? Riley asked, wrenching a bolt, his bicep flexing under rolled sleeves. David recounted the coffee clutch, the tentative invite to the shadows. Riley whistled low. Progress. But Whitaker's, they're like those old silos, full of grain. But one wrong storm and boom. He straightened, wiping hands on a rag, close enough that David caught the scent of motor oil and sandalwood soap. Their eyes met, held, a current humming beneath the fluorescent buzz. That night, sleep came fitful, dreams weaving Mark's gentle rebukes with Emily's pleas, Edward Whitaker's ghost looming like a thunderhead. Morning brought a call from Sarah, his ex, voice tinny from Arizona. Heard about the wedding drama. Don't push her, Dave. She's choosing her path. Hypocrisy burned. Sarah, who'd fled their marriage citing irreconcilable differences, code for his orientation, now playing sage. He hung up mid-sentence, resolve hardening. The will reading was in Lincoln that afternoon. Tom had invited the family, a formality for the merger of lives and ledgers. David wasn't blood, but curiosity, and a father's fierce protectiveness drove him there uninvited, tailing Emily's Prius in the truck. The Whitaker manse was a Georgian brick behemoth on the outskirts, lawns manicured like golf greens, stables housing horses worth more than David's house. Mourners milled in the foyer, black ties and hushed tones, crystal decanters sweating on sideboards. Emily spotted him immediately, color draining. Dad? What? But Tom, ever the diplomat, clapped his shoulder. Mr. Harlan, glad you made it. Grandpa Ed always said family was bigger than blood. The lawyer, a bespectacled hawk named Hargrove, cleared his throat in the oak-paneled study, unfolding vellum pages yellowed with age. The bequests flowed, trusts for cousins, land to charities, the feedlots to Tom with strings attached, sustainable practices or forfeit. Then, the kicker, a codicil, scrawled in Edward's shaky hand 6 months prior. To my grandson Thomas and his bride-to-be Emily Harlan, the Whitaker legacy passes only if the union honors the heart's true compass. No shadows barred from the hearth. Invite the father, the one who loved fiercely, as I once did in silence, and let him witness the vows, or the fortune crumbles to dust. Gasps rippled. Mrs. Whitaker's pearls snapped, scattering like judgments. Emily's eyes widened, locking on David, realization dawning. Edward, the devoted family man, had his own secrets, a love hidden in wartime letters, a life unlived for legacy's sake. Betrayal bloomed then, not from Emily, but from the grave. Edward's ghost demanding the acceptance he'd denied himself. Tom squeezed Emily's hand, whispering, "He knew about your dad," said it was the one regret he voiced on his deathbed. David stood frozen, the room spinning, as Hargrove intoned the penalty. Millions to LGBTQ plus causes if ignored. Poetic justice from beyond. Mrs. Whitaker stormed out, muttering of contests and fraud. But Emily rose, crossing to David, tears carving paths through her makeup. "The shadows," she choked. "He meant you. All along." The study emptied in a whirl of whispers, leaving the three of them, David, Emily, Tom, amid leather-bound tomes and the faint scent of pipe tobacco. Emily collapsed into David's arms, sobs racking her frame. "I was so wrong. Protecting what? This?" She gestured wildly at the opulence. "You protected me, always, and I shut you out like them." Tom nodded solemnly, his clean-cut facade cracking to reveal quiet steel. "Grandpa's will, it's his apology. To you, to us. We do this right. Front row. Dad jokes and all." David held her, the weight of years lifting like fog off the Missouri. But beneath the relief stirred something sharper. The codicil's revelation, Edward's hidden truth, mirroring his own buried pains. As they drove back to Omaha, Emily in the passenger seat chattering about revised seating charts. David glimpsed Riley's text. "How'd the Lion's Den go?" "Beers later." He smiled, thumb hovering over reply, the road ahead straightening like a promise. Weeks blurred into wedding frenzy. Tux fittings in David's garage, where Riley pitched in with cufflink advice and sidelong glances that lingered longer each day. Emily thawed, sharing bridal nerves over pie at Marie's diner, the neon sign buzzing like fireflies. "Tom's scared too," she confessed one evening, elbows on checkered formica, "about living up to the name. But you're the rock that always were." David nodded, fork spearing cherry filling, but his mind wandered to Mark's journal. Now on his nightstand, passages about forgiveness, about loving through the cracks. The betrayal's echo lingered in small ways. Sarah's frosty emails decrying the circus, Mrs. Whitaker's boycott threats that Tom quashed with a son's quiet authority. Yet suspense coiled tighter as the date neared, whispers of will challenges from distant kin threatening the fragile peace. David buried doubts in routine morning jogs along the Bob Carey pedestrian bridge, the river's gleam a reminder of crossings made. Riley became fixture, fixing the truck's AC, then staying for dinners where Emily grilled him on engine specs, laughter filling the bungalow like it hadn't since Mark. One humid July night, 2 weeks out, David found himself on Riley's porch, fireflies dancing in mason jars. "You're good with her," Riley said, passing a beer, their fingers brushing electric. "Like you never stopped being dad of the year." David shrugged, heat rising not from the brew. "Luck. And you, sticking around for the grease monkey gig." Riley's laugh rumbled low. "Nah. For the guy who looks at invitations like they're death warrants and still shows up swinging." Their knees touched, deliberate now, and David didn't pull away. In the firelight, Riley's face softened, scars from old fights mapping a life of hard-won tenderness. "Mark was lucky," he murmured. "But you're still here, breathing fire." "Let me in, Dave." "Just a crack." The kiss came slow, inevitable as a summer storm, salty with sweat, sweet with unspoken years. David's hands framed Riley's jaw, stubble rasping palms, and for a moment, the world narrowed to heartbeat sync, the river's murmur approval. They broke apart breathless, foreheads pressed. Riley's whisper fierce, "No shadows here." David pulled him close, the embrace a vow amid cicada song, romance blooming not in grand gestures but in the quiet reclaiming of self. Emily's bachelorette weekend in Des Moines brought levity. Photos of her in a sash, toasting with shots, texting David at midnight. "Miss you, old man." Front row secured. Red heart, but Monday's mail delivered the gut punch. A certified letter from Hargrove, detailing a challenge to the codicil by Edward's sister, Aunt Lydia, a Bible-clutching widow from Topeka, contesting on grounds of undue influence and moral turpitude. It read, demanding David's exclusion as the catalyst for this perversion of intent. Betrayal, fresh and familial, hit like a freight train. Lydia, who'd baked Emily cookies at family reunions, now weaponizing legacy against love. David drove to Lincoln unannounced, storming the Whitaker study where Tom pored over ledgers. "It's a bluff," Tom insisted, but worry etched his brow. "Aunt Lydia's got lawyers thicker than cornstalks. If she wins, the trusts dissolve. Everything." Emily arrived mid-rant, face pale from a spa day turned sour by the news. "Dad, this is my fault. If I hadn't." "No," David cut in, voice steady as the Mississippi. "It's theirs, hiding behind wills and whispers. But we're Harlan Whitakers now, tough as Nebraska sod." They plotted. Affidavits from Edward's old valet, hinting at the patriarch's own coded affections. Character witnesses, Riley volunteering with a grin that said more than words. As evening fell, the three shared takeout on the veranda, stars pricking the velvet sky, bonds forging in crisis. Emily leaned on David's shoulder, Tom's arm around her waist. A tableau of chosen kin, humanistic in its imperfection. Suspense peaked the week before. Lydia's deposition, a venomous affidavit labeling David predatory influence, dredging Mark's obituary for slurs. David read it alone in the truck, parked by the Platte, tears hot on cheeks. Riley found him there, wordless comfort in a thermos of coffee and a hand on his thigh. Fight dirty if you have to, Riley growled. Or clean. Just fight. That night, they made love for the first time. Slow, reverent, in the bungalow's brass bed, bodies mapping forgiveness. Riley's murmurs a litany against the dark. Dawn found them tangled, David's head on Riley's chest, heartbeat a lullaby. This, he whispered, this is the real legacy. The wedding eve brought clarity. Hargrove's call confirming the challenge dismissed. Edward's intent ironclad. His hidden letters donated anonymously to a Chicago archive. Testament to a love lived in margins. Lydia retreated, fortune intact but pride in tatters. Emily called, voice bubbling, rehearsals tomorrow. Bring Riley, he's family now. David smiled, packing the suit, the journal, a boutonniere for his +1. The church in Lincoln's hay-scented suburbs glowed under October sun, maples aflame in crimson and gold. David arrived early, Riley at his side in a borrowed blazer, hand warm in his. Guests milled, Whitaker kin subdued, Sarah absent but texting well wishes laced with regret. Tom stood at the altar, fidgeting with his vows, spotting David with a nod of solidarity. Then Emily, radiant in ivory lace, gliding down the aisle on a cousin's arm, her choice, symbolic. She paused at David's pew, front row center, pressing a handkerchief into his palm. For the tears, she whispered. Ours. The ceremony unfolded in swells of emotion. Tom's voice cracking on promises of through shadows and light. Emily's eyes shining as she vowed fidelity to the hearts that shaped me. The officiant, a progressive pastor with a rainbow stole, invoked Edward's words, the congregation murmuring assent. As rings exchanged and rice rained, David felt Mark's presence, a gentle pressure on his shoulder, Riley's fingers intertwining with his own. A quartet of love, unbroken. The reception at the estate was a whirlwind. Toasts clinking, a band playing at last. Emily's first dance with Tom melting into one with David, her head on his chest like childhood. I get it now, she murmured over cake and champagne. The fierce part. Thank you, for not letting go. Riley pulled him aside later, under string lights strung like stars, kissing him deep and unhurried. Proud of you, Harlan. Built a hell of a life. As night deepened, guests departing in a haze of laughter, David lingered on the veranda with Emily and Tom, fireflies winking approval. Sarah called then, voice small, watched the live stream. Beautiful. Sorry, Dave. For everything. Forgiveness flowed easy, humanistic in its grace. No grand redemption, just steps toward mending. Emily hugged him fierce, whispering, grandkids someday. You'll teach 'em to fish. Tom clapped his back. And love without apology. Driving home with Riley, the truck's headlights carving the dark. David exhaled years of held breath. The bungalow waited, alive with possibility. Mark's journal on the mantel now, beside new photos, wedding candids, Riley's arm around his waist. No fortune changed hands beyond the will's quiet justice, but legacies shifted, from exclusion to embrace, shadows to light. In the rear view, Lincoln's spires faded, but the heart's compass held true, pointing home, to love's unyielding north.